workshop series. This workshop gonna be on how to build resilient learner. I will share some of the strategies for converting self-doubt into student success. So originally, this workshop name we're focusing on imposter syndrome, but there's a stigma that come with that word, and we're trying to reframe the conversation to embrace the resiliency behind the feeling of imposter syndrome. My name is Lynn Wen. My pronoun is she, her, and I am an inclusive teaching coordinator at the Center for Innovative Teaching and Learning. My background is in chemistry, so I have a PhD in computational chemistry, and I've been teaching in higher education for the last over 10 years. And in 2023, that's when I transitioned to um, educational development. Oh, I see we have other people joining us. Welcome, Brittany and Janice. We just get started. So if you could share with the group, we have a small group here today, just your name and your discipline. You could unmute and introduce yourself, or you could type in the chat. Yeah, Brittany and Janice, I would just introduce myself. My training in chemistry, but I transitioned to educational development in 2023, and I'm currently an inclusive teaching coordinator. So we have a communication manager from the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences, Sociology Department. And College of Business. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here. And since we have a small group, so please feel free to pause me, stop me, and mute yourself so we can have our engaging discussion. So today, learning objective, we're going to talk a little bit about identities and how different identities grant or limit our privilege. We're also going to mention intersectionality and the relationship to imposter syndrome. Another thing that I'm gonna explore with you today is to talk about different strategy where we could use to destigmatize imposter feeling in our classroom. And part of it is to discuss how mistake are part of learning, and there's a harmful and a helpful way of viewing mistake. That's number three, learning objective. And then the last thing is to identify strategy that you could help your student turn imposter syndrome into productivity. So exploring the different concept of identity, privilege, intersectionality, and how they related to imposter syndrome. So the title of the workshop is Building Resilient Learner, right? So it's originally the title of this workshop focusing on imposter syndrome, but there's a stigma that come with it. So we're trying to reframe it and think about in way that how can we overcome this persistent feeling of imposter and then turn it into something productive and turn our student or help guide our student into becoming resilient learner. So first, identity, we don't exist alone, right? We exist in relation to one another. So this term social identity is one of the ways of naming the complex interaction between how we understand ourselves and how others see us. Um, so the identity are socially constructed. It can be readily apparent to other or not. It can be shared or kept private. It can be self-claimed or ascribed by other. So an example, I identify myself as a person of color, a woman, a multilingual learner of English. you probably can detect by now, I speak English with an accent, and that because I learned English as an adult when I immigrate to the US. Um, and a lot of the time we focus on the visible social identity. You can see that I'm a woman. I dress like a woman. You can see that my English have an accent, so I am a multilingual learner of English. But then there are other social identity that less visible. So for example, I'm a first generation college graduate. I'm a wife, a mother, a woman in STEM. Um, so my social identity inform and instruct the way I see the world, the way I teach in the classroom, and the way I lead in the community. Um, so that's why I want to define the concept of identity and how these identity affect the way individual, in this case, a student, may experience imposter syndrome. So if your identity is constantly viewed as less capable in certain setting, it can make you feel like a fraud despite your achievement. Another important concept that I want to underline is privilege. So the definition right here, and I took this definition from the two places, the Inclusive STEM Teaching Project terminology, and from the NIU Library Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Guide. It's a really good guide, and I put the link here. I will share with you the PowerPoint slide in the follow-up email, so you can check out the library guide if you haven't done so. Um, so the privilege is a group of unearned rights that extended to group based on their social identity. So for example, as a person of color, I may have less privilege than a white person in some setting. But at the same time, as an able-bodied person and a neurotypical person, I have more privilege than somebody who may be white, but they have a disability or they have some sort of neurodiversity, right? So the social identity in different contexts can give, grant, or limited our privilege. And some type of privilege list here: gender, race, age, ability, ethnicity, religion. And again, everything is context dependent. All of these kind of privilege is have a specific contact that associated with it. So, how is imposter syndrome related to identity or intersectionality? Our social identity can inform and influence the way we see the world, understand, approach, and behave toward the world, toward one another, right? And these social identity often intersect. So, the intersectionality concept arise is how different aspect of one identity intersect and affect one experience of privilege or oppression. Um, so this is just an example of why, like, only 21 of corporate leader in the U.S. are women. Only 4% of those are women of color, and only 1% a Black woman, right? So the intersectionality of being a woman in corporate leader in the US and the intersection of being a Black woman really could could make your representation is really underrepresented in this field, right? So that's just one example. So, what is imposter syndrome and its relationship to intersectionality? So, imposter syndrome is a phenomenon were introduced in 1978 in a study by Clance and Imes. The study identified the imposter phenomenon or imposter syndrome among high achieving professional, middle to upper class white women. So, despite outstanding academic and professional accomplishment, women who experience the imposter phenomena persist in the believing that they are not really that bright and they have fooled anyone who think otherwise. So this original study that defined imposter phenomenon um, in 1978, it did not adequately capture the experiences of racially and ethnically um, and that because of the context during that in the late 70s, right? So the current conceptual life failed to consider unique dynamics such as racism or perceived discrimination and marginalization that are predictor of imposter syndrome among these population. So there's certainly a need for more inclusive research that consider the unique experiences of these different minority individual in relation to imposter phenomena. As NIU become a minority majority institution, this need become more critical. Um, so the imposter syndrome is prevalent among high achiever, well-educated, and well-accomplished professional. Um, Originally, the imposter feeling was thought to be prevalent among high achieving women, but more recent studies have shown that the feeling of inadequate access among both men and women and across the gender spectrum. However, there is a consensus that imposter feeling is especially prevalent among people working in the field where the gender or race make them an obvious minority. So naturally, things get worse when we consider the intersectionality, the intersection of multiple marginalized identity that some of us carry, depend on the context, right? So this can be caused by a lot of factor. Perfect perfectionism, setting unrealistically high standard for yourself and for other, the tendency to comparing yourself to other, and then when it comes to the marginalized identity, some identity in certain contexts, we face stereotype, discrimination, and microaggression. And in setting like higher education, there can be lack of role models, mentorship, and opportunity for leadership. So these are some of the things that can contribute to the feeling of inadequacy, a feeling of less capable. Um, of and it's ultimately to the feeling of don't belong here in higher education or not belong here on NIU campus. So I I carry the identity of a woman in STEM, of an immigrant, of a first generation college student. Um, and when I first got to the US, I have no money, no connection, no understanding of how higher education work. And it's really hinder my ability to success. But at the same time, it's also create a challenge, an opportunity for me to grow into the resilient learner that I am today, and it's informed me to be a compassionate teacher. So I'm going to pause here real quick and check. Do you have any experience with imposter syndrome? Have you observed that in your students, and what? How does it manifest in the classroom? Or is this like a completely new concept that you haven't encountered before?
I can't speak to my experience teaching because I don't teach, but I'm hoping to
Ah,
start adjuncting this year. But personally, I have felt the effects of imposter syndrome, and I feel it's insidious. Really, it just it doesn't feel good. So
Yeah. First, could you please help me learn how to pronounce your first name?
Yes, it's Janice.
Janice. Thank you. Janice, is it a business, especially in oh, you're the communication manager. Okay. So manager, I was just wondering if you work among like other identity like men or yeah, because usually there's some root cause for the way that we feel, right? The way others see us or treat us. So perhaps yeah, I don't want to dig into it, but are you considered a staff member or a faculty
I'm a staff member, although I'm hoping
to
to be an
become?
adjunct instructor.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, that could be okay. That's great. And I see Tita is typing something, so let's see. I definitely experienced imposter syndrome at time, especially in academic spaces. There have been moments when I questioned whether I truly belong or if my accomplishment was just luck. Perfectionism play a role too. I tend to set high standard for myself, and if I don't meet them exactly, I sometimes feel I'm not good enough. So it's a shared feeling. I read what you put here, and I feel like those are the words that I would describe myself from time to time as well. And I think one thing that I want to emphasize is in all of these study that done on imposter syndrome, it's occurred to high achieving individual. So that means it usually happen to people who demand a lot of themselves and they have achieved a lot. They already well accomplished professionally. Those are the people who have the tendency to feel this way. So it's good to affirm that it's a normal feeling. It's common among high achiever. All right, thank you for sharing that. So I did put here some example of how stereotype and microaggression show up in our classroom and on college campuses. And I put here an example of underrepresented minority. So traditionally, women as excluded from higher education entirely when it first start, right? But today, women elbow ourselves into higher education and have become dominant in certain specific fields. So, like in social science, in liberal arts, in early childhood education, or nursing, um, usually there's a whole lot more women in those fields. So suddenly male student in the field become the underrepresented minority. So an example of underrepresented minority is a male student in early childhood education. Um, and I think we certainly need more male child care provider and elementary teacher who are male. We all have implicit bias and unconscious classification formed by societal stereotype based on identity characteristic like race, gender, and socio or economic status. So we could do more with diversify in any field. I also put here an example of implicit bias, having low academic expectation for multilingual learners. So sometimes the lack of communication in English can be perceived as lack of intelligence, which is not true, right? So sometimes when these behavior not being called out or addressed, implicit bias can grow into microaggression. And an example of microaggression is assigning intelligence to student based on their race or questioning their competence if it doesn't agree with your assumption. So we need to understand how harmful stereotype and behavior can create imposter feeling. Um, a few studies show negative correlation between character trait like self-esteem and the imposter phenomenon. However, the cultural specific context were not considered in this study. So I think one of the implication of imposter feeling is the reduce self-esteem when you are constantly viewed as less capable because of your title, because of your lack of English or because of a lack of access or money, because of things that you cannot change, because of your skin tone, your accent, or the location on earth you were born, right? So the original study defined that imposter phenomenon, it in a way did not adequately capture the experiences of racially ethnic diverse group. And so I think there are more study that need to be done in this area, more inclusive research that consider the unique experiences of different minority individual in different setting, to help us have a well-rounded understanding of imposter phenomenon. All right, so here are what you here for, right? After we understand what the imposter syndrome, what is where it's come from, how does it manifest in different ways. Here are some strategy to destigmatize imposter feeling in your classroom. So the first thing is awareness and education, right? And that's why you hear. I hope that's part of the reason why you're here. So to acknowledge it and then build awareness, we need to educate ourselves about the imposter phenomenon and its impact on mental health. Um, Professors, supportive staff, educators, students, we all should educate ourselves about imposter phenomenon and its manifestation in diverse population. Increased awareness can help all of us recognize imposter phenomenon in ourselves, in our student, understand its implication for mental health, include anxiety, depression, and reduce self-esteem. So that's why we offer this workshop. And I applaud you for making the time to be here and have this conversation. The next thing is to reframe your mindsets. So I think first we have to work as model here, right? So when we reframe our mindset, we can help students reframe their mindsets. So first we need to acknowledge our achievement, reflect on how your hard work and resilience and skill earn you a place at NIU. So when you reframe your mindset, you can teach students to do the same thing, um, to reflect on their hard work, their resilience, their skill that earned the place at NIU. Um, Next thing is to replace negative self-talk, and I have to do that. I have to remind myself that constantly. So every time I have a self-doubt, I have to challenge that self-doubt with affirmation like I belong here. I'm capable of learning and growing, and that's why I'm here. Um, Another strategy is to create supportive environments, foster open discussion about identity, privilege, about pressure that could contribute to the feeling of self-doubt or less capable. Connect with peers who share similar experience. Encourage your student to join study group, student organization, seek mentorship from professor, advisor, campus leader who willing and able to provide guidance and encouragement. And then use tell student about the mental health resources that we have at NIU, such as counseling service or for faculty and staff, it would be professional support. Um, and then the next thing is to embrace a growth mindset. So shift from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset, mean embracing challenges as opportunity to develop. One practical strategy to view mistake as a part of learning. So that's the practical strategy for when you teach in your class. If you can make sure students understand that making mistake is just a part of learning, that's really help students see that it's not a mistake, it's a lesson learned because you learn something from it. And the last thing is harness the power of self-compassion. And again, this is something that I have to practice and remind myself daily. Treat yourself with kindness and patience, and teach your student. Tell them that. Tell them to treat yourself with kindness and compassion. Um, and remind them that yes, no one is perfect. Everybody make mistake. Um, every challenge that you face is an opportunity to learn, to adapt, and to grow stronger. So these are some of the strategy that you can use to help destigmatize imposter feeling in your classroom. All right, so I'm gonna pause here real quick. Do you have a personal experience where a mistake ultimately led to significant learning or growth? And the reason I put this question here because when you teach in a classroom, when you embrace storytelling and you embrace that, hey, even though I'm the professor, I'm the instructor of this class, but I have make mistake and I turn that into an opportunity to learn. That usually work really well for students. It's a hard topic. I share. So I learned chemistry in English, or even though I could barely speak it. So I arrived in the U.S. in 2004, and I attend the Oklahoma City Community College. I take a bunch of math and science courses because they were easier and they have less English, right? So number are universal, chemical symbol are universal. So I actually take math and science courses to learn English. So I remember I did poorly on my general chemistry exam. And I came and talked to the professor who taught that class. And in my broken English, I'm trying to explain to her that I'm not stupid. This is my first semester in America. I'm learning English. I knew chemistry. I just didn't understand English. And I still remember she saying that this is her first semester teaching because she was working in industry. And my first semester taking classes were her first semester being professor. Um, so she asked if I had the course textbook, and I couldn't afford it, so I didn't have it. She told me to go to the library and check the book out from the reverse desk. And so I didn't know how to navigate a new culture and the higher education system. So just the fact that she direct me to the library to check out the book on reserve, that was wonderful. So I asked her what I need to do to score better on the next exam. And she said, do the homework problem at the end of each chapter. They are not graded, but if you can do them, you will do well on my exam. So I did just that. I went to the library, I checked out the book for her course, and every day I would check out the book for 2 hours and work on the problem at the end of each chapter. And then I score like a whooping 98 or 99% in the next exams, and I was driven to score 100% on every test that I've taken. And so anyway, I continue to do well in chemistry even though I didn't know a lot of English. And all of that thanks to the professor that I had, Dr. Courtney Dodd. So that an experience where it's a mistake. I didn't do well on the first exam. I make a lot of mistake in there, but it's ultimately led to a lot of learning and growth. So the next question I had here was share some strategy or practice that help you effectively learn from your mistake. And I will finish my story with sharing some strategy from that story. So the first thing was reflection. When I were really upset that I didn't do well in the first exam. I did think that school probably wasn't for me or for an immigrant with limited English like me. But at the same time, it's an opportunity for me to slow down. Um, I I always done a lot of reflection. I don't know where I learned that, but I know I was not stupid. I know that I can learn. Um, there's things that I'm not good at, but learning math and science, not one of them. I did really well in Vietnam in math and science. So I know that if I get some feedback from the person who wrote the exam and graded on how to show her that I'm not stupid, that's why I come to my professor. It's just like, I'm not stupid. Help me. This is my strength. This is my weakness. And let's see my weakness. How can I be successful in your course? And she did. She gave me a way to do it. So reflection first, slow down opportunity, get feedback, um, feedback opportunity, right? So teach your student to have the courage to ask question, what did I do wrong? What can I learn from this experience? What do I need to do differently to achieve the outcome that I want? Um, and so it's like basically go to the professor, go to you. How can I be successful in your class? And so if you have really clear learning objective, really clear way of how you make your exam to assess the student learning of the learning objective, share that with your student. Like the way my professor shared with me. It turned out that most of her exam questions come from the homework with different number, different phrases, but it's assessing the same learning objective. So she told me that if you can do the homework, you can do well on my exam, and I did that. Um, the last thing is moving forward. So help student after reflection get feedback. What did they learn? So let's move on. So we reflected on the way teaching and learning. Um, to be honest, the way of teaching and learning in America is a whole lot easier than the way that I learned in Vietnam. So in Vietnam, I was not given the learning objectives, and they just throw three books at me, and then we have a midterm exam, and then we have a final exam. And if you fail, you fail. So when I get to America, having clear learning objectives really helpful, and then have the activity that help you learn the learning objective, and then for assessment you will be assessed on the learning objectives that you were given in the beginning. So I find that systematic way of learning is so much more easier and clear than the way that I have to try to figure out what the professor want me to learn, which were the way that I was learning in Vietnam. So if you can help your student set goal, redirect them to here's the learning objective for my course. Here are the content, the activity that you need to do in order to achieve the learning objectives. And then you will be assessed based on how much you actually learn and attain knowledge for the learning objective. Um, so those are some of the strategy that I use to help me and help my student to recognize that mistake as just part of learning. Anybody would like to share what are some of the strategy that you use to kind of normalize making mistake? It's okay, if you don't want to share, we can move on. And then the last thing I have here is how can you, the professor, the instructor, create a culture that encourages open discussion and learning from mistake in your class? Some of the ideas that I have is in my class, I work very hard to normalize being wrong or making mistake. I keep telling my student that it's okay to make mistake. It's normal to make mistake. This is how we learn. So at the beginning of the class, I often introduce a learning objective for the day, and I often ask questions to evaluate the student prior knowledge of those learning objectives. And if I get a wrong response, we actually have a little celebration. I would say something like, excellent, we are going to learn something new today. Because if you already know the answer to this question, you probably shouldn't be here. You should be in upper division chemistry class. Um, and then for homework too, some idea when it comes to homework, I give my student unlimited attempt on their homework so they can correct their initial response and learn from their mistake. And I only record their highest score attempt on their homework. Um, Another thing that I do is I acknowledge it takes bravery for a student to raise their hand, to ask for clarification, or to answer a question. So as an instructor, I often acknowledge and thank students who ask question for clarification, for more explanation, or for more example, because I usually tell them, I'm sure you're not the only one who have this question. So thank you for asking the question to help me slow down and give me an opportunity to provide more explanation or more example so that other people can be benefit from that too. Um, so the next learning objective is I'm going to demonstrate how mistake can be both harmful and helpful. In this case, this is how mistake can be harmful, right? So if we take mistake as a sign that we don't have the potential, we don't do any reflection on where the mistake happened, why, how, then there's no room for growth here, right? So if we don't take ownership of the mistake, then we can't really learn. It's then a fixed mindset or a deficit mindset that you don't have what it takes or you don't belong here. Um, so there's a study that shows students who see their instructor endorses this belief that you don't have what it takes. Um, it's when they find themselves making mistake in those classes, they often feel as though they are imposters in that classroom. And that can really set them back in terms of seeking help, asking question, finding study group to work with. All the things that we know actually contribute to student success. Right. So if as a professor, you embrace the harmful mindset that if you make a mistake, you don't have what it take. Um, then when students make mistake, instead of seeking help or asking for feedback, they won't do any of that because they think, okay, maybe I just don't have what it takes. Maybe I don't belong here in this field, right? So I and then it can potentially produce more harm too. Is making the student avoid taking risks and when they don't embracing taking risks, then there's less opportunity for innovation. There's less opportunity for creativity as well. So as a community, a Husky NIU community of scholar and learners and teacher, do we have a mindset culture where we believe as a group that intelligence, skill, or ability are fixed? You either have them or you don't. Or do we think that it's possible to grow, develop, and learn new skill, um, learn new ability and other aspect of our life, right? Um, so how mistake can be helpful? Um, Mistake are opportunity for reflect, review, and practice, right? It's like I tell my student, whether you play a sport or you play an instrument, you gotta practice. Same thing with chemistry. If you want to be better at working on analytical problem in chemistry, you gotta practice. And then you have to get feedback. Um, Ultimately, rethink and learn something new. So I make it clear to students in my class that this is the way most humans learn. And we have ample of research to back that up, that things just don't come effortlessly, perfectly, immediately. We need repetition, we need practice, we need testing, failing, and learning from all of that. All right. So how do we help students fail productively? Um, in research, in research, it's a new and uncharted territory, right? It's usually you at the leading edge of your field. So failure or fail hypothesis, fail experiment, we view failure as important discovery. It lets you know what didn't work. So try something else, come up with a new hypothesis so you can quickly rethink and try the next approach. So in a way, when professor, especially when you do research at the cutting edge, leading edge of your field, mistakes are valuable. They are discovery. You know what didn't work, right? So how can we transform that same sentiment into teaching? So complex and major mistake often happen because the smaller mistake are not caught or addressed. So how can we help students make small mistakes so they don't make big catastrophic mistake, right? So consider giving them multiple draft review, opportunity to review, revision, multiple attempt on homework and quizzes so they can learn from their mistake and be rewarded for learning, for the progress that they make. Um, Retake exam. So retake exam is something that th- there's still a lot of pushback and time and effort. Yes, I understand all of that, but if the student fail an exam and you just let them go, they're not gonna learn, right? If the goal is for them to learn these learning objective, when they didn't demonstrate that they learned the learning objective, do you want to just let it go, or do you want to encourage them to actually sit down and hold them accountable and help them learn the learning objective that they didn't? Um, so that's what I meant when I say opportunity to retake exam. And then in real life, how can we set up to catch and correct mistake before they can cause harm? Having a checklist can prevent basic mistake. Um, but then we do have to go through the checklist mindfully. Another thing is to avoid a culture of zero tolerance for mistake and failure. When we create a culture that doesn't tolerate mistakes still happen because we're human, but we don't hear about them. And so if we don't hear about the mistake that were made, then no opportunity to learn, to improve, and potentially more complex mistake will happen because of that. So in summarize some of the strategy to turn imposter feeling into productivity in your classroom and in general. The first thing is recognizing that self-doubt is a common feeling. It's a real feeling. It's a shared experience. Many people working in field where, for whatever reason, make them feel like they don't belong, whether they are a minority in their field, like the example of the men being a minority in early childhood education. So anybody could experience the imposter feeling, from a student to professional. um, so acknowledge, recognize that, right? Second thing is, set realistic goal for your student and help them set goal for themselves. So the first step is you set goal for them and help them get there, guide them there, and then teach them to set goal for themselves. The small achievable goal, um, not too ambitious, unachievable. Um, Another thing that you could do is to encourage students to find support system, including counseling, especially for the different mental health services that we provide here at NIU. Encourage them to surround themselves with people who believe in them, believe in their ability, like family, friends, mentor, celebrate their accomplishment. So we need to celebrate and appreciate small successes to build up confidence, right? So enjoying small successes and celebrating your own achievement build confidence for you too, and it can develop a more positive outlook. Um, Model the behavior. So have self-compassion. Um, every time you have a negative thought, challenge that negative thought, especially if the negative thought is about yourself or your ability. When you experience such thought, question if they're true, if there are any evidence to support those negative thought, and if there isn't, if you couldn't find any evidence for it, it's very crucial to challenge those negative thoughts and replace them with more positive one. So this will help you develop a more positive outlook and boost your confidence. The last thing is activism. So um, advocate for yourself and for other. Um, so by engaging in activism, um, there's a study that show when people have the feeling, imposter feeling, feeling of not belonging, less capable, they've turned that into activism, and it have the power to make you feel empowered, and it empower you and other who feel marginalized or discriminates against to advocate for yourself. So if there's a way you could help your student know that they belong here on campus in higher education, they have earned their place and they are qualified and capable, and don't let anybody tell them otherwise. Seek counseling if they need support and redirection. Any question, anything that you like to add or remove? All
I
right.
don't know. Oh,
Yeah,
sorry.
no, go ahead.
I don't know if this is helpful or not, but something that I found kind of powerful when I looked at imposter syndrome was just reframing it entirely. Because it's not really a label that the people who were given it created, even though we're reclaiming it. Um, it was Reshma Sajani. I'm mangling her name, but she did a commencement speech at Smith in 2023 about imposter syndrome that I'll put in the chat. And I thought, wow, this is a really interesting way to rename it. And then kind of reclaim it in a way, because it's not that something's wrong with us. It's
Mm,
just it's a term that's been used to describe, you know, people who feel that they don't belong.
mm.
So this has been a really helpful presentation. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and thank you so much for sharing this link with me. Because when I work on this presentation, I look for a lot of different resources, and I love the way you mentioned to reframe that, because the concept is it's great that it were mentioned and talked about in 1978, but it's been a while. The word changed, the historical context, everything changed, right? So certainly reframing is a good approach. So I will watch this video that you share. And thank you for sharing it. And thank you for sharing your thought. So here, just a moment for us, and you can choose to share this or not. But if you just like get a piece of paper and write down a few things that you've done in this week or the last week that you feel good about, that you feel proud of. This is a very good exercise that I do for myself. Just pause and I will stop talking for a minute, and then you just write down something that you've done this morning, yesterday, to reaffirm your worthiness to the world, your value, your contribution to society and to higher education. So get yourself a piece of paper and feel free to share it in the chat, or just keep it to yourself. But write down a few things that you've done recently that you're proud of. All right. So here's just some reflection question for you. So reflect on your identity, privilege, or lack thereof, and how they inform your imposter feeling. And then the next question I want you to kind of ponder and reflect upon is, how can you create a culture that encourages open discussion and about mistake and learning from mistake, particularly if you teach in a class? How can you do that in your class? And then the last thing I want you to think about is, how will you challenge the dominant narrative in any field? Like every field have a dominant narrative and practice. And how can we ensure that the underrepresented groups don't feel like imposter? So thank you so much for joining me today. And I will send you a copy of this presentation with all the resources that I used to develop the presentation. And I'm here if you have any question. You can always reach out to Saito, reach out to me. And yeah, thank you so much. I hope you take away something to think about and how you can improve in your class. And Janice, I really hope you're gonna get that instructor position and you get to teach soon. I
Thank you so much. This was great.
thank you. Have a good day.
You too.
Thank you so much. Have a
Mhm.
good